The entire world is built on opposites: good versus evil, masculine versus feminine, logic versus emotions, order versus chaos, heaven versus hell, white versus black. Everywhere you look, reality is organized through polarity, and most people think that's normal. But what if humanity was never meant to live in separation consciousness? What if duality was not the destination, but the initiation? Welcome to your cosmic sanctuary. My name is Elle the Alchemist, also known as the Holistic Energy Alchemist. And if you found this signal, it's probably because your consciousness is expanding beyond the reality you were taught to normalize. Here, we explore consciousness, energy, emotional alchemy, spiritual embodiment, and the deeper architecture of the human experience. So take a deep breath and let's enter the transmission, because the more I observe humanity, the more I realize that people are not operating from wholeness. They're operating from fragmentation. And once consciousness fragments, everything becomes extreme. In modern society, you have more people over-identified with logic, but disconnected from feeling. People drowning in emotion, but disconnected from structure. People performing strength while emotionally collapsing internally. People giving and giving and giving until there is nothing left of themselves. Everything becomes distorted once the masculine and feminine become disconnected from each other internally. And when this happens, the masculine without the feminine becomes force, because the feminine principle is flow. It is feeling, intuition, softness, receptivity, movement, rhythm, and presence. And the masculine principle is structure, direction, function, stability, action. But once they separate from each other, humanity starts moving unnaturally. Now function overrides feeling. Productivity overrides presence. Performance overrides authenticity. Control overrides trust. And emotion, it starts being viewed as weakness instead of intelligence. And this is what happens when the masculine principle dominates the feminine principle instead of existing in harmony with it. Life stops being experienced as sacred and starts being treated as mechanical. Now, people are valued based on productivity instead of presence, efficiency instead of aliveness, performance instead of soul. And this is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves, because society has conditioned human beings to function like machines instead of living organisms. People are expected to override their emotions, override their bodies, override their intuition, override their exhaustion, override their humanity. Keep producing, keep performing, keep pushing, keep working, even when the soul is tired, even when the nervous system is collapsing, even when the body is screaming for rest. And once humanity disconnects from the soul of life, everything becomes artificial. Relationships become transactional. Work becomes survival. The body it becomes a tool instead of a sacred vessel. Emotion, it just becomes inconvenience, and people slowly lose connection to the intelligence of being alive. But emotion was never the enemy. Emotion is energy, it is information. Emotion is movement, it is rhythm. And when emotion is not allowed to move, it doesn't just disappear, it gets stored in the body, stored in the nervous system, stored in identity, stored in generations. And eventually, people start building entire personalities around survival. That's why so many people are constantly in fight or flight and don't even realize it. Their nervous system has normalized stress, normalized hypervigilance, normalized emotional suppression, normalized disconnection. And this is where consciousness starts being rooted in survival instead of in the heart. You even hear it symbolically. People say when they get mad, I'm seeing red. And red is root chakra energy, survival energy, protection energy. So now people are reacting to life instead of creating from life, protecting instead of opening, controlling instead of flowing. And eventually, the internal fragmentation becomes externalized into society itself. Now, the whole world mirrors the split. Politics, religion, relationships, gender dynamics, work culture, media, sexuality, even spirituality. Everything becomes sides. Everything becomes opposition. Everything becomes pick one. And this is also why so many people struggle in relationships now, because they're relating from wounded polarity, also known as trauma bonding, distorted masculine energy, distorted feminine energy, unresolved survival patterns, unprocessed emotional pain, people trying to receive love through identities they created to survive. And one of the biggest distortions I've noticed is the caregiver identity, especially in people who overgive emotionally, people who learn that their worth came from carrying everyone else, saving everyone else, being strong for everyone else, holding everything together. But the problem is, eventually the self disappears inside the role, and now exhaustion becomes identity. Self-sacrifice becomes identity. Overextension becomes identity. And society rewards it. Society praises burnout, praises emotional suppression, praises overworking, praises disconnection from the body, because this world has normalized fragmentation. But fragmentation is not wholeness. And honestly, I think humanity is reaching a point where people can actually feel that something is off. Even if they can't articulate it yet, people are waking up to the fact that survival consciousness cannot create heaven on earth. Fear cannot create harmony. War cannot create peace. Force cannot create balance. And this is why so many systems are destabilizing now, because all of these systems were built on fragmentation, and consciousness is starting to recognize the split. And once you can see the split, you can no longer unsee it. But the beautiful thing is, recognizing the fragmentation is the beginning stages of integration, because duality was never meant to be the final stage of consciousness. It was the initiation, the beginning, the first phase of remembering. And the moment humanity stops trying to destroy one side for the other, something entirely new becomes possible. Thank you for entering this transmission with me. And if this resonated with your spirit, your heart, your consciousness in any way, make sure that you become a part of your cosmic sanctuary as we continue exploring the deeper architecture of reality together. I love you all deeply. And until next time, continue expanding, questioning, remembering who you truly are. Peace, loves.